Welcome back everyone to Gacha Interact. In today's video, it's that time of the month where we're going to look at the gacha revenue. And in this video, it's for February. Now, if you did want to see what we talked about with January, you can check out that video for the last month before this one in January and talking about the revenue there. I'll have that linked at the top for you. But in this video, let's look at the February gacha revenue and see how most of these gacha games are doing, and of course the ones in particular that we care about being number one Genshin, as well as some of the other ones closely related, Honkai Star Rail, Zenless Zone Zero, and also Wuthering Waves. So getting right into this, obviously we can see right here at the top, we have Pokemon TCG Pocket doing pretty well, went up a little bit. Love and Deep Space went down just a little bit, not too big on the fluctuations here. Dragon Ball Z, Dokkan Battle went up by double though practically, and that's doing pretty good. Honkai Star Rail saw a drop a little bit. Naruto Mobile saw quite a bit of a decrease there, about 33% or so. Genshin Impact saw a massive decrease, and I guess we'll be talking about that one here in a minute, as well as some others. But let's jump down to Zenless. Zenless dropped a little bit there. Would go down even more. Wuthering Waves dropped by about half, a little bit more than half. Arc-Knights is there as well, dropped by about half. Nikkei dropped. Infinity Nikki dropped a little bit. So you can see a lot of that there. But I guess jumping right into this, now that we've kind of briefly overviewed a little bit of these, Vixen, what are some of your initial opinions, I guess, on the big four that we cover? We can start from the top, I guess. So looking at Honkai Star Rail, it's at number 4. It dropped just a little bit, and I know you did pull up some of the banner history. So we know what that looks like in February from basically doing the last video. We knew what the banners were going to be, so now that we do know that and have known that, what are kind of your thoughts on why Star Rail has seen maybe a slight decrease? And I know this might be a little difficult because it's not that much of a decrease.
Yeah, it's interesting. You have to realize that at the beginning of February, we were just getting off those first few days, getting off the Herda, and then after that, it was 3 straight weeks of Aglaya. I think a lot of people were getting off of getting the brand new character, the Herda, and so at the end of banners, you usually don't see an increase in pulling factor. You usually always see it at the beginning, so that's why they did really well in January, is because a lot of people were wanting the Herda. She's an extremely good and strong character, and she is an emanator as well, so it definitely shows a lot of love and show for that. But the other thing to keep in mind, once again, that the end of her banner is not going to show anything exceptionally well. But the next part of the banner is going to be, or the next banner that came up was Aglaya, and I think a lot of people, even though she's the first remembrance unit, I think a lot of people were either not fans of her or not fans of what she necessarily could bring to their specific team, or maybe they were probably just, recouping their losses from probably pulling on Aglaya, the Herda before Aglaya. And then at the end of the month, we had the beginning of the Tribi and Yunli banners. So honestly, I don't necessarily think that showed a lot of promise either, because I definitely think there are future characters that people would rather have than Tribi. I think a lot of people would rather pull characters like Mighty or Castris or Anaxa. Definitely some of the other units I think people have in mind. So I don't necessarily think that the beginning week of Tribi and Yunli's banner that started on the 25th is necessarily doing anything exceptionally well for Star Rail. They didn't drop too crazy, but I do think that it probably was just a little bit of that. But I think that people who liked the Herda were probably in the same amount of people that liked Aglaya. So you have a similar value, which is why I think they dropped a little bit, but not a crazy amount, specifically at least for Star Rail. Have you or a loved one been a victim to the losing to Chi-Chi syndrome? If so, you are qualified for benefits from today's sponsor, Lootbar. Lootbar is an online top-up platform that allows you to purchase Genesis crystals for a cheaper price than you see in-game. The main reason Lootbar is safe to use is because they only need your UID and what server you play on. This way, those emails and passwords are completely safe. If you do happen to have any possible issues, Lootbar has 24/7 live chat support that you can use to fix any problems you may have. Lootbar also supports plenty of other games and in-game currencies besides just Genshin Impact, so go ahead and check out those other games that Lootbar supports. Your delivery is guaranteed within 30 minutes of purchase, and usually we've seen it within a couple of minutes, sometimes even 30 seconds. There are plenty of other creators that have and still do endorse Lootbar, including ourselves, so if you need some extra credibility, here you go. But do you need to see a little bit more than a few sponsored ads? Go ahead and check out the almost 30,000 reviews that Lootbar has on their site. So what are you waiting for today? Go ahead and check the links in the description or the pinned comment to check out Lootbar today and start saving. Thank you again for Lootbar for sponsoring this video, and now back to the video.
Yeah, and I think I would agree with Star Rail's place right here, really for a lot of the things you said. And the reason I would think we didn't see a massive decrease is just because of a character like Treeby being a pretty valuable support. I mean, when we look at the kit and stuff, and if you guys know, she's a pretty valuable character, and not just for the newer kind of meta, all of these 3.x characters, but even for previous teams, she can be very, very good for. If you didn't have a character like Robin already, if you don't have a Harmony character in general, Treeby is a good pickup. So, that makes a lot of sense. Also, Aglaya being the first, kind of mixed. A lot of people didn't. A lot of people did. So I think it makes a lot of sense that we're seeing 46 mil right here, dropping from 50. So
A
for
lot
me,
of
that
love.
makes a lot of sense.
A lot of love, I think, that Star Rail got. I think that there's probably a lot more people that pulled on Aglaya than maybe, had said so, which is why, maybe the audience is kind of maybe being a different way than what we're seeing here with these numbers. But these are the legitimate numbers, so we can definitely see how that is kind of coming to shape. But Genshin, yeah, Genshin is
Oh boy.
Genshin took a big hit, which I'll jump right
I
into
think
the banners, and then I want to
that was
kind of grab
foreseen.
your idea from it, because I think we can all understand why they jumped. So the version 5.4, the first half was a standard character, or a going to be standard character, Mizuki, who didn't show any promise in the beta, and definitely doesn't show any promise now. And then Sijun as well, which a lot of people are just seeing it as a very skippable banner. And that started February 12th into March 5th. And obviously you had the two brand new characters before that, which a lot of people had already gotten. So characters like Maoika and Sitlali, the end of their banners, they kind of existed. So therefore, I don't think that that's what happened in the first few weeks of February. There wasn't really too much hype really for them because they were already gotten. A lot of money was already spent. But for the majority of 5.4, never mind now that we had, Risley and Farina as well, there's just not, I don't think that there was any, we did have the Chronicled Wish, which I think also maybe showed a little bit of love and time for, but I don't know. It was a very sad and depressing time.
Yeah, no, I think like you said, because the beginning of February was already nearing the end of 5.3. So the people who already wanted Arlecchino and Cloran, and even maybe like 4-star pulls because of Lanyan and stuff like that, had already pulled. That was in the end of January that people had kind of already done that.
Right.
So like you stated and pointed out, most of the times when a new banner is dropping, most of those people are pulling in those first couple of days because they've been either waiting for it, saving for it, etc. So that's exactly why I think this has seen a massive decrease, because what we're seeing here is really just some of those last minute Arlecchino Cloran pulls, and the people who maybe did want Mizuki just to add to their collection, because there are quite a bit of people that do like to just collect every single character, and so they just, okay, let me get Mizuki because this will guarantee her, and I don't have to leave it up to chance on the standard banner or something like that. Because I do know there's several people like that. But that's mainly what we're looking at. Those are mostly just last minute Arlecchino and Cloran, a few Mizuki wanters and enjoyers, and then also some Sijun pickups.
I was about to
Pretty
say,
much for the same reason.
mostly
They didn't get
Sijun
her in the
pickups.
first... Yeah, they didn't get Sijun in her first release banner, but they're like, she's just... Man, she's kind of cute. I just want this character, and so this is her first rerun, so... That's really a little bit of all of what we're looking at, and that's pretty much it. So that makes a lot of sense. And even in our last Gacha revenue video where we looked at January, when we were looking ahead, we were pretty much saying, yeah, it's going to see a massive decrease, because at that time we did already know about Mizuki and stuff. So we knew it wasn't going to be a hot month for February.
No, we knew February was going to be pretty rough, but I think that in the future, actually, if we want to go back and talk about this with Star Rail as well, I think Star Rail will stay pretty similar. Actually, I don't know. The first few weeks are going to be Trivia and Yunli, which is not going to be terrible, like we talked about. But I do think at the end of the day, with Star Rail, really quickly, going back to that, you also have a character like Mighty and Huohuo, and those two work pretty well together. But, Huohuo also is a character that some people might want to pick up for their Aglaya. So it might be a little bit more help for that character. Mighty is also a brand new unit, Destruction Imaginary, who looks really, really strong. At the same time, we might see similar numbers and nothing exceptional, only because I think people are waiting for Casterus, who it looks extremely strong as well after him. Now, she's version 1 right now, so we don't necessarily know exactly what she's looking like. Mighty definitely shows more promise, but until we get a few more version changes and whatnot in Casterus, I think those numbers might go up, might go down, depending on how that looks for that. I definitely see an uptick, definitely, in the next little while. mainly for
I
the
do
end
too.
of March, but from the phase 2 of Mighty and Huohuo. But for Genshin, there has to be an uptick. I mean, you have a standard, and yeah, I think honestly, most of that money was definitely Sijuan. Like, I wouldn't even want to pull from Mizuki. I think people wanted her, like you said, just to
Right.
get her, maybe her weapon. Maybe they grabbed her weapon and then are like,
Probably.
I'll get her on the standard whenever I lose, but I want to, maybe like you, Rift, who kind of want every single character with their specific weapon. Maybe they were like, you know what, I'm going to get her weapon because I'm eventually going to get her standard. Eventually, she'll probably, be a 50-50
Yeah.
loss or whatever.
They're like, all right, I have Tainari and Dia, but I still to this day don't have their weapons, so I want
Yep,
to make sure
it's
I
a
can
pain.
lock in with the weapon.
Exactly, exactly. So I think maybe those people were maybe thinking about that. But I don't know. What do you think for the future of Genshin and Star Rail?
For the future of Star Rail, you kind of said it'll probably sit around the same. It's kind of hard to say because Tribi was already, Aglaya and Tribi both pretty sort of hype, not like mega hype characters, but it does make sense that we're sitting around 46 mil, only coming from 50. Like that makes sense between the Herda, Aglaya, and Tribi because those are probably the big three in terms of January and February. And then looking ahead, we have Mighty is going to be coming out pretty soon. He's the next one. And then also we'll have Casterus in the first half of 3.2, most likely. So I think those two characters right there probably have equal, if not more hype than also, like you were saying, Tribi and Aglaya. Mighty especially, I think, is just kind of, if I had to guess based on the community look, I think Mighty gets the most hype and simping and what have you. So I think we may see an increase. I'm gonna expect mid 50. It's just my wild guess for the month of March, just because of Mighty mainly. But also Ho has aged like fine wine. She's always been a pretty decent pull. She hasn't really like lost too much value, and I think part of that is because she is a healer and a sustain for the team, while also being an okay support. She gives
That
attack in
energy.
the burst, she gives energy, so she's like a weird mix between harmony and abundance. So I think that just gives her a lot of value intrinsically. So anyways, moving on from there, I think we'll see maybe a slight increase. That's just my guess. But with Genshin, it has to see an increase, okay? Because
There's no
this is
shot it
pretty low.
doesn't.
This is like bottom of the barrel. If we go any lower than this, I'm gonna have some questions because Mizuki Sijui, if we're just being honest, in terms of value of a banner, it doesn't get worse than that. I don't think. Like honestly. But looking ahead, we will be having a Risley Farina. I think the Farina rerun is going to see some pulls. Whether or not that's people that don't have her are pulling her, people that already have her pulling constellations because everyone knows her C1 and C2 are something to think about and go for. The weapon banner, therefore, being okay value. I do know that people, I will say this, I do know that most people with Farina will say that the weapon's not worth getting until you have at least like C4 Farina. C1 and C2 are just more valuable than having her weapon.
Mm-hmm.
If you care about like the value and power of where you want to go, which one's better. So definitely Farina cons, or just getting her in general if you don't already have her. Risley is not a meta character. He's not terrible though, and has some pretty cool new teams with the Sitlali Malwika stuff, Bennett and whatever. So there's options there, but also it's just the fact that he's had a long time to rerun, and this is his first rerun. So there's gonna be quite a handful of people that want to pick him up. They've been waiting for his first rerun to happen, and here it is. And this is, for those people, this is a great banner because maybe they'll want to go after the weapon. They could get Farina's weapon. Farina is here as an option, just once again for more cons or something like that. So I think we'll definitely see an increase for that reason. I'm thinking maybe mid 30s to lower 40s at best with Risley and Farina. Now, their banner's dropping this Tuesday, so that's very shortly. That's probably going to be, what is that, March 3rd or 4th? So
Yeah, fourth.
at the tail end of March, that means there's still time. We'll see a change on March 25th. That will be version 5.5 with Verisa, Yansan. So I expect that to have a pretty heavy influx. And because of that, I'm going to say at the tail end of March, we'll see probably another good 20. Like, Varisa's had some hype, but she's kind of weird. She's also had a lot of hate, too. There's a lot of back and forth. But I think when we sit down and really think about the player base, I think most people are excited for Verisa. Also, a new 4-star is usually always exciting. I know that was the case with Auron, even when we got Chaska. Chaska was one of those mixed opinion characters, and I think Varese is kind of the same way, a very mixed opinion character, at least in the community. But most people liked Auron. We're pretty excited about Auron. I think Yanson's going to be the same way, if not better, just because of having already looked at her kit and kind of being a Bennett 2.0. Like, she's going to be a hype character. If Varese is not, I think Yanson will save the day. So I think March will see a pretty substantial increase. We might double. I'm going to also say it's going to be probably at least 50 mil. So probably around the same amount as Star Rail.
I was about to say, I would probably see the same numbers. Varese, I think, actually is very similar to actually Aglaya. I think probably more love than we see in somebody like Chaska, just because probably a lot of people just weren't playing Chaska just because of... I think there was a lot more hate for Chaska than there actually was. I was kind of surprised, actually, by it. But I think that overall, there's probably going to be a little bit more... I think the haters are probably just the louder mouth people, honestly, against Varese, so I think we'll definitely see an influx either way with that. Never mind that. I think people are going to skip Risley. I know this is his first rerun. You have to keep in mind, we did get the new cryo set, which means that even if it's not Skirk, if it's some other cryo DPS, has to be coming out in the near future. I think a lot of people are going to keep that on their mind, and we're definitely talking about that when we talked about the Topon.
I think that's a great point to bring up too.
Yeah, so the Farina, though, like you said, I think is going to be most of that, revenue alongside of Varese with Farina. So, making sure I don't mess up those two names. But yeah, but looking next, we have Zenless Zone Zero. Now, Zenless actually kind of surprised me in that it went down in numbers. We had Astra Yao, and I think the banner for Evelyn is going on right now as well with Qing Yi, and then Ellen Jo is as well. Now, I think a lot of people probably went for Evelyn just because it's Evelyn, but I think that's really all that we're seeing here. I think not a lot of people pulled for Astra Yao. I'm not really 110% sure, but we didn't see an insane decrease. It is only 8 mil, but compared to their 26, it is a big chunk. It's a 33%, almost a 33% decrease. So it is a big chunk. At the same time, I think that you might see an increase in the future. I think that depends on the character base. I think it depends on a lot. I think after Miyabi, a lot of people have been backing off of playing Zenless, so I don't think that a lot is going to come from them until they get to their 2.0. They're going to have to knock something out of the park. I think that most of their dedicated fan base is playing, and that's great. I think that they've got to make a lot more changes if they want new player bases. And the problem with that, with a lot of games, which that's just my thing with Zenless, is I'm waiting to see when you're able to hold on to your old fan base and then collect new fan bases. That's what you have to do, is make sure that you're not, when you chase after the new, you're not getting rid of the old and making the old unhappy, because those new people might not fully love the game, whereas those old people loved the game, and if you get rid of them, you have some big problems. So I'm hoping that, whatever Zenless does, I'm not personally a fan of playing it as much anymore, but I hope that, they keep on track, they do what they're doing, and if they do look for, trying to increase their revenue and whatnot, depending on certain characters and changes they make in the game, they'll make sure to keep in mind those older players as well.
Yeah, and kind of to bounce off that, like you're saying, I think a lot of the dedicated player base, or the people that still are playing Zenless very faithfully right now, they probably, Astra was a big character, and I'm not sure, but I think most of her hype was in January. Maybe that's why January was a little bit higher. You can correct me if I'm wrong. You have all the history pulled up. So maybe that's what that is. Like you said, though, Evelyn's still pretty, a lot of people like Evelyn, so I think that's why there still is, okay, we still have basically 18 million here. But maybe a lot of those dedicated player base, they have in the back of their head, they know, hey, 2.0 is going to be coming out pretty soon. It's coming up, and so maybe people are thinking about the future. Maybe the people that stay on top of the speculations there know that maybe something's cooking for 2.0, 2.1, new character, stuff like that. So if they've already got their account,
and the new Andy.
Exact. So. Oh yeah, dude, Trigger looks pretty good. I saw that art. And she's part of the motorcycle gang, right?
Yeah. No, Trigger is actually, I think, a part of one of the other Spec Ops versions of the game, basically, or whatever.
Oh, okay.
But she's another stun unit, and she's physical, so I think there's a lot of hype there. And you do have characters like the 5-star Ambi that's coming as well. So there's going to be enough hype. I think that there's going to be an increase. I think that this was maybe a lower point just because it was maybe cool in an idea, but maybe not cool in terms of the actual gameplay for the characters. So maybe that's why people weren't picking her up. But honestly, yeah, when I looked back, it was January 22nd. It looked like when they started the Astra Yao banner, so maybe a lot of people picked her up in January. Therefore, we saw the
Yeah.
quote unquote increase maybe there. You have to keep in mind, I think she was the first healer in the game as well, so there's probably a lot of love there. Maybe people were doing that, but yeah.
I think that's exactly what it is. Yeah.
And then looking a little bit later now at the last game, we have Wuthering Waves. Now, Wuthering Waves, I'm a little surprised that they dipped so much. And the only thing that I can think of is that they went so low only because they went to certain, I don't even know. They grabbed the characters like Phoebe, Brant, and Changli are coming out in version 2.1 that's upcoming soon. So I'm thinking we're going to see a pretty big increase. I think Phoebe's actually already here. And then I think that we have Brant coming in pretty soon. So I think, I think the previous character before that, whoever the little character was probably not a big hyped character. Whereas someone like Phoebe maybe was or wasn't. I think a lot of people had their minds on the Taylor Swift of Wuthering Waves. But then we have someone like Brant, who, if you've seen his gameplay and you've seen what he can do, I don't care who you are, that he just looks really, really fun to play. Plus, he's got this like pirate-esque kind of vibe to him, so I think he's going to pull in a lot of pulls. So I think that there's going to be a pretty good amount to see in March. Yeah, Phoebe was starting in February 13th and ends March 6th. So a long time period there, at least for phase 1, but that makes sense for what is kind of happening in the game right now. But and how short February is, you guys have to keep in mind. Usually you have like 3 separate banners kind of happening in 1 month, whereas now, because it's only 4 weeks in the month of February, we're only really usually ever going to see 2 banners. So I think Phoebe, I don't think a lot of people actually really pulled for her necessarily, and obviously I think the numbers definitely show for that. But I think Brant and Changli rerun is going to probably bring a lot more hype for Wuthering Waves.
Yeah.
Will it increase?
And I would agree with that. Yeah, it's hard to say. I think it might increase, but like you said, it's hard to say. I don't think it's going to be January if things stay the same or static or whatever. As far as player base, I don't know how well Wuthering Waves is doing. I'm not playing it as much anymore, so I don't know what the fan base, if that's been growing a lot, or a lot of people leaving. I haven't really heard much, but I think, like, my personal opinion with the reason January did so well. Remember we talked about Carlotta. She released January 2nd. That was very much around the same time of Mawika Sitlali for timing for people who don't remember too well. But January 2nd, that Carlotta did really well. I think she had a lot of hype. She was the new character with the new region, or new area, whatever you want to call that. But then also near the end of January, we did see Roxia, and that was January 23rd. So a lot of Roxia's initial sales were still in January. So I think Carlotta and Roxia, and I do remember Roxia being a pretty hyped character. I think she was more hyped than not, based on what I heard and felt from the community, as well as the Jinshi rerun with Roxia. So I think January just had really good characters, really good banners. When you look at February, the only banner change we saw was right in the middle, and that's why February only saw, also like you said, being a little bit of a shorter month, has only seen one actual patch change to a new set of characters, and that was Phoebe. And so I think, considering that Phoebe was the only character mid-February to be a new available character, reflects why the revenue for February is
half.
a lot lower, because it's literally only one character. But considering that, I think that means Phoebe did pretty well, considering what character she is in the game. Because yeah, January is two new characters, Carlotta and Roxia, as well as the Jinshi rerun, which is to be considered, because I know Jinshi's a very favored character. So yeah, I think that reflects pretty well. And because February had a mid banner like this, that means March is going to see a banner change very early on in the month, which means we'll also see one at the tail end of March. So March will see two different versions, two new versions. So there should be an increase, and I'm going to guess sitting around 20 mil.
Yeah, I would say probably about the same. You've got a lot of interesting kind of things, I guess, that are going on with Wuthering Waves here. But I think, once again, you have Changli, so I think Wuthering Waves is definitely a big one for Changli, or getting her rerun. But I think Brant is definitely a big end of that as well. And if that can happen, then that's going to be insane. Never mind, in 2.2, a lot of people are looking at a new character, Cantarella, who looks insane. And I think, like you're saying, that banner change, the hype for Cantarella, a lot of people are backing off of a character that they really liked, which was Zani, for the future, just because they got to see Cantarella come up. So I think that we're gonna see. I might even shoot for 30s in March, just
Yeah.
because the insane amount of love that I've seen for some of these new characters. Brant and I think Cantarella look.
Oh, you're right. She does look really
She
good.
looks really
I
cool.
remember seeing
Brant's
someone's like
playstyle
it's like a
looks so
Farina
much
Navia.
fun. If I was still playing Wuthering Waves, I would. I don't think I wouldn't have any money in my bank account. That's for sure. So I could definitely see why there's a lot of. And that's why I think even still, like
I'm
you
with
said,
you right there.
if Phoebe can hold her own at half of what January was with 2 brand new characters, you can easily try to double that number. And so it stayed about the same. So I think Wuthering Waves actually, even though it did have a quote unquote dip in sales, technically stayed the same if you actually look at it correctly. Maybe a small dip because of the 225 loss from half, but still an insane number. I think Wuthering Waves is still putting up. I think they would have cleared. They probably would have been right under or right above Genshin Impact, if I'm being honest with you. So I think Wuthering Waves actually is, even though it's lower on the leaderboard right now, it actually is showing more promise than the other two gachas right now from what we even saw. So keep it in mind. That was actually a very good thing I didn't even think about there. So yeah, well, that's kind of everything we've got. I know like things like Cookie Run as well. I did want to throw that out because I know a lot of people have been talking about it, especially somebody in our Discord has been talking about it a lot as well. Never mind that we have, Pokemon's always going to stay at the top. That and Love and Deep Space. I think a lot of people are Love and Deep Space fans, which that's always going to stay at those two are always going to stay near the top just because the insane amount of love and support those games have been getting. So yeah, I think that's just what we're going to consistently see at the top there. But besides that, that's everything we've got really talking about these revenue changes, what's kind of been happening in the month of February, what we kind of saw in February, what we're possibly going to see in March. Let us know what you guys think of what happened in February, maybe why it happened, and maybe what you guys think is going to happen in March with each of the different gacha games and maybe any of the games we didn't talk about. Thank you guys for watching the video though, and we'll see you guys in the next one.